Hello and welcome back. This is Greyfish, and in this section I'll teach you how to create a custom splash screen for your Windows 95 installation in accordance with the OPSACOMP B- qualificationary examinations. Before we start, however, I think it's important to understand how the Windows 95 boot splash works. When you turn on your computer, you'll most likely see a screen which looks like this. Most of the image is static, but there's also a nice little animated bar at the bottom. This bar is useful for telling you that Windows 95 is still loading, and in the unusual event this bar stops for a very long time, it may be an indicator that your computer is frozen during the startup process. Windows for Workgroups also has a splash screen, but it's not animated, so the only way to tell if your system may have locked up is to check the fixed disk activity light. You can press the escape key to see what is going on in the background if you have drivers or utilities that run in autoexec.bat, and if you prefer not to see the boot splash, you can add logo = 0 to the Msdos.sys file. In the olden days of DOS, this was another binary file, but in Windows 95 it's now just a plain text configuration file. Now the default splash is embedded in a core system file called io.sys. This file is required to boot Windows 95, just as it was needed for MS-DOS. You don't want to go around messing with this file, because it may prevent your computer from starting up, and you'll have to go through the trouble of reloading the file from your setup CD. However, Windows 95 does allow you to add your own custom splash in a separate file called logo.sys. Let's start with an example file. This logo.sys file I have here is the one used when you have the Microsoft Plus Pack installed on Windows 95. It may seem like there's some complicated code involved in this file if you go by its name alone, but it's actually nothing more than a bitmap image, and you can view it in many image editors like Microsoft Paint. The entire image is exactly what you'd see in Paint. There's no additional parts of the image hidden outside of the boundaries. Every Windows 95 splash screen needs to be a 256 color bitmap image with dimensions of 320 pixels wide by 400 pixels high. This also explains why the image looks a lot more squished compared to what you may be used to seeing. When Windows 95 loads this image, it stretches it to 640 horizontal pixels. You could create a new image right now using the exact attributes and save it as logo.sys. It works, but you won't get any animation. So, how exactly does a splash screen get its animation? Technically, there isn't any true animation in a splash since the pixels themselves don't change, but colored bitmaps have an embedded palette, and a simple yet effective trick called palette rotation is used to shift a range of colors at the end of the palette all together, moving the last one to the other end of the range of colors that are used in the palette rotation. You'll be very limited on the types of animations you can create using palette rotation, but you can get really creative with it if you have the right idea in place. You can potentially create a waterfall in motion, a tennis ball being volleyed back and forth between Mark Rosset and Lindsay Davenport, or a giant laser beam firing from a robotic whale if you really want to. For this tutorial, we'll only create a simple splash screen with an animated gradient bar. To get started, you'll need an advanced image editor like Photoshop or PaintShop Pro, as well as a hex editor. I'll use HXD as my hex editor, which is a free program you can download online. If you're not going to draw everything yourself, you'll also want a picture handy. For reference, I'll make a copy of logo.sys and rename it to logo.bmp so Photoshop will want to open it. I'll open up a photograph as well so we can quickly put together a nice looking splash screen. Before creating our new splash, I want you to take a look at the color table of logo.sys. You'll notice that the colors located at the end of the color palette all correspond to the animated bar at the bottom of the splash. Also, the video mode Windows 95 switches to when loading the splash screen has an interesting little quirk. The first color in the palette can be used as part of the static area of the splash, but it's also used to change the color of the area outside of the usable dimensions of the screen. This splash has it set to black to maintain consistency with all the other usual video modes, but you can make it a different color if you really want to. This picture illustrates what you'd see if you set the first color of red. You see, you get this red border around your splash screen. Anywho, let's go ahead and create a new file. Making sure we have our units set to pixels, we'll create a new image with a width of 320 pixels and set the height to something less than 400 pixels, depending on how tall your bar will be. For this demonstration, I'm going with 385 pixels. This won't be the final size of the image. It'll be grown to 400 pixels once we're ready to add our bar. This is just a cheap trick that I made up to make sure no colors are wasted when the image mode is changed to indexed color, and it selects all sorts of colors that it's going to use for the new indexed image, because it's going to have a limited color palette to work with. Now we'll click on our photograph and press Ctrl A and Ctrl C. Then go to the empty file and press Ctrl V to paste. Now, press Ctrl T to transform the image and scale or move it until you have it right where you want. Create another file with the same splash width, but this time subtract 400 by the height of your previous image and use that for the height of the bar you'll create and work on separately. Select the linear gradient tool and edit your gradient to use unique placeholder colors for now. I'll create a gradient with bright red, green, and blue colors so it's easier to see the details. Click on the leftmost side of the image, and as you draw your gradient, hold the Shift key to straighten the line it'll follow. Save the bar image as a Photoshop file. And now, change the image mode to indexed color and set the number of colors you'll use. For my case, I will put in 20. That'll be 20 colors. This is going to be important how many colors you use, because it will determine how many steps that the palette rotation will cycle through, which can make your animation look faster or slower, depending on which number you choose. Don't forget to set the force option to none and disable transparency. You can play around with the dithering options if you like. Maybe just find a particular dithering setting that looks best for your bar in particular, but for this one, I will use a noise dither. Go back to the image menu and open the color table. Save the table to a file as you'll need it for merging with the Splash's color table using a hex editor. Now go back to the splash you're constructing and switch to indexed color. To reserve color space for your animated bar, you'll need to subtract 256 by the amount of colors used in your bar and set that as the number of colors to use in the static area of your splash. You can go ahead and accept the colors Photoshop chooses for you, but if you don't want your splash to have a bordering color, or you want one that fits well with your image, select Custom in the Forced drop-down menu and double-click the top left square. You can make the first color pure black, select a random color, or grab one from the image itself. This color will not be applied to the existing pixels, so as long as it is different from the rest. Open the color table and save it to a file for reference. Go to the image menu again and select canvas size. Set the units to pixels and type 400 for the height, and click the top middle square for the anchor. Now save your image as an 8-bit bitmap file, making sure not to enable compression. Open both of the color tables you saved in a hex editor. To know exactly how many bytes you need to copy from the first offset, open the calculator. Enter the number of colors your animated bar uses in decimal format, multiply it by 3, subtract 1, and convert the result to hexadecimal. This will be the end offset you'll need to jump to in your bar's color table. So go back to HXD and press Ctrl G to jump to offset 3B in this case. Then select all the binary values preceding it. A neat little trick to do this is to press Ctrl, Shift, and Home. This will select all the characters up to the from where you're at up to the first. Now what you want to do is go to the bottom of this file and paste overwrite the bytes that you have copied. You want to make sure that you land on offset 2FF so that the colors are all at the end of the table. Next, what you want to do is go to offset 300 and type 01. Then, in the immediate next offset 301, type FF. This will tell the color table when you load it in Photoshop again that you are using a 256 color table instead of a 20 color table. Now go to your splashes color table. Go to the offset of the first blank color. You should easily find it by locating a large gathering of zeros near the end of the file. Again, when you go to paste overwrite the new bytes you have copied into this file, make sure everything stops at offset 2FF, and if it doesn't, just undo and try again from a neighboring offset until you get it right. And once again, change the value of offset 300 to 01 and 301 to FF, so the color table will use all 256 colors. Now you want to go back to the bar color table and select all the colors at the start of the file, and what you'll want to do is just overwrite them with zeros. There's a little fill command to take care of all of that very quickly. Save both color tables and load the color table of your splash into the splash you're working on. You will see that the colors from your bar are now in the table, but if you try to copy and paste the bar into your splash now, it will use the wrong colors. This is because the color index assignments do not match, so go back and open the original bar file saved in the Photoshop format. Set index color again, and this time select the custom forced color set. Load the bar color table you saved, and you'll see it uses the same colors as your last image, only they are now at the end of the table as they should be. Apply the new indexed color options, being mindful of the dithering option you want, and now you can copy your bar to your splash with the exact colors that you want. I mentioned before that these are placeholder colors, all with unique assignments. If you want to create a scrolling gradient that animates seamlessly and uses colors fairly similar to what's in your picture, you'll need to do a bit more trickery to make sure the bar animates independently of the image, because each pixel is assigned a color based on its index located somewhere in the palette. In case an image has duplicate colors in its palette, Most image editors tend to always use the first index of the occurring color, which can prevent us from animating the splash properly. Take a note of the starting color in the animated portion of your splash's color table, as you'll need to look them up in the bitmap image. Unlike with ACT files, the byte values of individual colors in bitmap files are stored in reverse order, although the ordering of the colors themselves is not. So when you search for the starting color, reverse each byte. If the start is 00, 0C, F3, you type F3, 0C, 00. Take another note of the offset you've landed on. Now go back to your bar image and change the colors. If you're creating a gradient animation, Photoshop makes it straightforward to change many colors in a ramp. Click and hold on the first color, then drag to the color you want to end the ramp at. In my case, I'll stop at the 10th. Take notes of the new colors so you can apply the same in reverse. Once that's done, click OK and save another copy of the bar as an 8-bit bitmap. Find the first color in the new bitmap file. Again, the color bytes are stored in reverse order. From there, select all bytes up to offset 435, assuming you're working with a 256 color bitmap. If you're still using a 20 color bitmap like I was here, you'll have to find the range of bytes to copy by looking up the first and last colors yourself. Overwrite the colors sourced from your bar to the splash's color palette starting at the offset you noted. If you open it up now, you'll see the bar has the exact colors you want. We're not done yet. Close Photoshop and go to offset 32 in your splash. This specific offset stores the starting point in which the palette is to rotate all colors beneath it. Noting how many colors the bar has, which is 20 in this case, you'd subtract 256 by that number again and convert it to hexadecimal and type it into the file. Once you save it as logo.sys, it's ready to use in your Windows 95 installation. Before we go, I think it's worth mentioning a few additional files. If you installed Windows 95 on your own, you may have seen this picture which says, "Getting ready to run Windows 95 for the first time." This splash is a file called logo.sys and is only used once before being removed from your hard disk. You probably don't need to create one yourself unless you're putting together your own installation directory with updated or custom files. One distinct difference Logo has from the normal splash is that it implements a sort of ping-pong animation where it rotates the entire palette once and reverses the rotation all the way back, then repeats. More of an alternating motion rather than a continuous forward motion. This is controlled by neighboring offset 33. If the offset's value is 00, the rotation moves forward continuously. If it's 01, the rotation moves back and forth. This is how the Windows logo in Logo gets that color fading effect without having to take up as many indexes. I've read that setting 33 to 01 may cause problems, but I haven't bothered to test this claim, so if you're running into problems with this setting, feel free to let me know. Last but not least, there is logow.sys and logos.sys. These two splashes use the same 256 color bitmap format with the same dimensions, but they cannot be animated. The rule for the first color index being used in the outside border still applies nonetheless. Logo.sys is used to tell the user Windows is currently shutting down, and logos.sys is used to let them know the shutdown has completed and they can switch the computer off safely. Unlike logo.sys, which is located at the root of the C drive, logow.sys and logos.sys are located in the Windows directory. You can replace each of them as desired. To review, Windows 95 loads a pre-made splash from io.sys by default, which you should not change. Remember, you can disable the splash by typing logo equals 0 in Msdos.sys if you don't want it. The splash is animated by rotating colors at the end of the palette embedded in the image, and the first color index is the color of the outer bounds. Every splash in Windows 95 must be a 256 color bitmap in 320 by 400. To create an animated splash, you need a good image editor like Photoshop or PaintShop Pro, and you also need a hex editor like HXD or XVI32. For today's activities, I want you to go ahead and create two splash screens, one using continuous rotation and another with alternating rotation. And I also want you to make a logow.sys and logos.sys for telling the user Windows is shutting down and shutdown is completed. Explain how a custom splash may be useful in certain situations, and explain why having no splash screen may be preferable in others. There's also some review questions in Lab 3.9 Windows 95 Splash Anatomy. I want you to do these questions and turn in your worksheet when you're done. I hope this tutorial has proven to be helpful in creating your custom splash screen. That's it for this section. Thank you very much for your time. Bye.